Welcome to Relationships as Spiritual Practice, Bridging the Secular and Spiritual. With your host, Alia Lowe Chardet, founder of Mindful Compassionate Dialogue and the Wise Heart Community.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for being here today for talking about people-pleasing, the people-pleasing pattern. This was a request someone wrote in, so thank you also for your request. Yeah. So to talk about this, I'm going to reference a couple of chronic reactive patterns. On our online learning platform, you can take a course, 8-week course called Chronic Reactivity. And it describes 8 chronic reactive patterns in detail to help us recognize these patterns, have compassion for ourselves and others, identify the underlying needs, and have freedom from them. Yeah, be able to live from your authenticity. So the people-pleasing pattern, I think, is most related to the abandoned collapse pattern and the betrayed indirect pattern among the 8 chronic reactive patterns. Yeah. And just want to bring in lots of compassion that any reactive pattern was originally designed to care for you, to meet a very particular set of needs in a way that at the time you designed it was the only option you had available. So we just want to be real gentle with ourselves as we examine these reactive patterns and learn to interrupt them and learn to shift. Okay. So first I would describe or define this pattern as an attempt to meet needs for acceptance and care. And more superficially, harmony. But harmony really is like a top layer need here that is meant to protect these underlying needs of acceptance, care, support, being loved. Those very, very core things. And so the idea with both the abandoned collapse pattern and the betrayed indirect pattern is to basically win favor. And they each have different ways of doing that. But both patterns have a certain element of charmingness, being charming, being pleasing to others. And include things like kind of endlessly making space for someone else's content. So a primary complaint would be that there's not mutuality in relationships. And this is because there's an orienting one's energy around what is happening for the other person. What does the other person need? What does the other person prefer? What would work in this moment? So this kind of basic orientation is perhaps at the center of the reactive pattern. And originally, that orientation was also meant to track danger in a certain way, right? To have vigilance in a certain way. So any reactive pattern has a certain amount of vigilance, which means tracking for threat. As we come out of these patterns, then that vigilance can transform into beautiful attunement. right? Attunement is tracking someone else's needs consciously. When you consciously and from your heart and from your authenticity make a decision to attend to someone else, which implies that you would also consciously come back to yourself. But with a people-pleasing pattern, there's often not a coming back to self with the regularity that provides groundedness, clarity, and just inclusion of your own needs. So often with these patterns, there can be a sense of emptiness inside, a sense of collapse that you aren't cared for or seen in the world, or a numbness for a lack of connection, because it's very hard to create connection if there's no you that's participating in that connection. Mm. And so also both the abandoned collapse and betrayed indirect can kind of have their uh, how do I want to say their protest of sorts when the people pleasing stops, and then there's another layer of reactivity from having been in the pattern. So the first one often is that sense of collapse, that sense of just wanting to kind of disappear from the world and collapse into a heap of helplessness and hopelessness. And with the betrayed indirect, the protest reactivity can look more like a meanness or a sudden judgment or criticism of others, um, an anger or resentment, and kind of a course, kind of being coursed. Because each pattern, especially betrayed indirect, is working to charm others by being very refined, careful with words, careful with behavior, this kind of constant editing, right? In order to shape what's expressed to please others and to gain that favor or to gain a sense of power in a relationship. So it's painful to be there. There can be this loneliness, this emptiness, right? And the very thing that's sought after, this deep acceptance of who you are and this deep care for your needs and who you are, seems very far away when you're quite entrenched in the people pleasing. Okay. So then let's look a little bit at 3 interventions for this pattern. If you've been with me before, you know the first intervention that I often offer is to be able to recognize it super clearly. And for that, I'm just going to propose specific and doable for you so that you have it. Just for 1 week, that every day you write down or record by audio the symptoms of being in that pattern that you recognize throughout the day. And symptoms can occur in any category of experience: posture, body sensations, words, thoughts, beliefs, particular energy, particular kinds of decisions or actions, a way you hold your face, even a way you make eye contact or touch, what you think about, what you talk about. So it can occur in any of those categories, right? And it would include some of the things we've already named. Energetic symptoms could be a sort of leaning into other people's field, kind of leaning in and leaning out of your own body. A tightness, impulse to manage or control a situation. Hmm. A desire to, especially a desire to manage someone else's emotions or state so that they can potentially be in a state to care for you, right? It's the ultimate goal, but usually not the conscious goal. Cheering up or explaining or giving advice, anything to kind of manage the state of someone else. And of course, there's the most basic behavior that people pleasing refers to of accommodating. Accommodating by saying yes to requests, accommodating by trying to anticipate and do what you think the other person wants, right? This accommodating, um, kind of dismissing something you don't like would be an example of accommodating in order to go forward. And so dismissing something you don't like in order to go forward as an automatic habit, not as a point of discernment. I just want to be clear about the difference there. Because sometimes we give up things, our preferences, out of discernment and decide something else is more important. So for week one, you're just keeping a journal every day and naming, either aloud in your audio or by writing, or even to a friend, any symptoms you can see. And then, as after you've named all the symptoms of people pleasing that you notice during the day, you're taking at least one of those situations and reliving it in your mind's eye and identifying if you had been connected with yourself, what universal needs were present for you in that moment, and what preferences might have bubbled up for you. So, taking at least one situation and finding what was actually true for you. That may be pretty difficult. You can look through the needs list and just see if anything catches your attention, might be the simplest way to do that. Okay. And then in week two, your invitation is to notice the pattern while it's happening. So you've named all these symptoms, and from naming that, there's probably a couple that really are easy for you to notice. So identify two symptoms of the people pleasing pattern that are the most easy for you to notice and set your intention every day to catch those symptoms in the moment that they're happening. So at this level in week two, you can simply say, I'm doing it. I'm doing it. I'm in the pattern. And just keep observing as long as you can. It may only be seconds, might be a couple minutes that you can observe yourself in the pattern. And then if you have space, kind of a level one intervention with yourself would be balance your weight over your center, fall silent if you were talking, and just focus on one inhale and one exhale. Or internally ask, what do I want right now? That last one might be a bit of a leap. So in week two, you're setting your intention to notice the pattern while it's happening. This phase of noticing the pattern while it's happening without being able to take a new action can sometimes last months or year or years. So I'm giving you this simple week one, week two, week three, so that you have at least kind of a starting place. So noticing, and then if you can notice and come back into your center, fantastic. If you can notice, fall silent and take a conscious breath. Fantastic. If you can notice and ask yourself, what do I want? Awesome. Okay, that's the practice I'm inviting you into for week 2. Week 3, I invite you at the beginning of this week to choose a couple of situations or relationship in which you know your people pleasing pattern goes into high gear. And when you choose those, set your intention to notice your own needs and preferences before you enter into that relationship or situation. And then when you enter in, you're practicing keeping your attention in your own center. Over and over again, finding your center. Of course, this would be supported by meditation practice, right? Practicing that in meditation every day as a supportive condition. And then the fourth thing I invite you to do is to take the risk of sharing something that is true for you in that situation or relationship, whether it is invited or not. And it doesn't have to be a big thing. The idea here is for you to take the action to take up space in that relationship. So you could share something simple like, ooh, I feel a little chilly today. I didn't put on enough layers, right? Anything, could be anything. So you're just practicing taking up a little space or a lot of space in the relationship. Okay, let's just go over those again. So in week 3, you're going to choose one or two relationships or situations in which you know that people pleasing comes up the most. And then before you interact with that person or that situation, you're going to set your intention and connect with what needs or preferences might possibly come up in that situation. You're kind of anticipating what will be alive for you as a way to build the connection with that in that context. And then once you're in the situation, I'm inviting you to do this practice. Sometimes I call it a shuttling practice. Come back to yourself, attend to the other. Come back to yourself, attend to the other. Find your own way to come back. When I say come back to yourself, what's your anchor there? Is it feeling your center and you're the center of your abdomen? Is it feeling your heart? Is it placing a hand on your heart? Is it asking yourself a question or repeating a mantra? Is it changing your posture, shifting your energy, sitting back in your own energy field and body? It's important for you to know for you what that means and to practice that in meditation every day, assuming you have a meditation practice, hoping that you do. Okay. And then the last thing is to practice sharing something that's true for you in that moment with that person in that context. Anything. Could also ask a question to take up space. That's fine if that's more comfortable for you. If you one of the contexts that you're in is a meeting, you maybe just raise your hand and have a question as a way to participate or offer something that you're enjoying, right? Okay, how's this landing for you? I just want to remind you to be patient and compassionate with yourself. That as you connect with your own authenticity and what's true for you, and bring that into the world more and more, yeah, it might feel vulnerable or difficult or challenging. At the same time, I'm guessing it'll feel satisfying, especially as you choose to bring more of your authenticity into relationships in which you're more fully received with honor and care. I think you might be surprised at the amount of care someone might have at the ready to offer you when you come forward more vulnerably. So that's an important question to hold. Who really probably has the potential to offer care if I allow them to care for me? Yeah, holding that question for yourself. Thank you so much for your practice. Thank you for being here with me and being in community with this work we do to become beings of light and love in the world. Sending love from my heart to yours.
You can learn more about Mindful Compassionate Dialogue and find free resources, live offerings, and self-paced workshops online at www.wiseheartcommunity.org.